bad.
What's up, my friends? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Vance, also known as Ricky Varandas, and a great episode for you today. Somebody I've been a fan of for a very long time. You guys might know him from the Rogan podcast. He's been on there a bunch of times. He's been on London Real. He's done a lot of interviews throughout the years. He's been doing personal training since the 70s. One of the first people to introduce kettlebells into the U.S. He does jiu-jitsu. He's owned a gym. He's done so many different things. He's traveled just with a backpack and some handful of clothes and whatnot. So I don't know if that's even possible, a handful of clothes. I guess I'm just trying to make the point with very little things. He's traveled the world. A very interesting guy. Steve Maxwell is with us today. We talk about functional medicine, big pharma. We even get into vaccines a little bit. His website, maxwellsc.com. It's Maxwell and then SC for strength and conditioning. In the show description on our YouTube channel, I always put links to our guests' social media accounts, their websites, all that stuff. So it's an easy way of finding more information on any guests I have on. I also put links to my Patreon page. If you want to support the show, and all the new Patreon supporters that have been supporting the show, thank you so much. Every single person that signs up for Patreon gives me a positive feeling and positive motivation that I'm a little bit closer to one day, hopefully, finding a way to do this full time. So thank you so much, guys. Also, I have a PayPal account. You can find that in the show description on my YouTube channel, or you can go to my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. You'll have links to my Patreon page, my PayPal account, my merch store. So plenty of different ways to support the show. If you want to buy shirts, hoodies, whatever, if you want to tip the show using PayPal, or if you want to support the show using Patreon. And if you do support me using Patreon, I'll let you know in advance who I'm booking, who I'm in conversations with, and discussing coming on and all that stuff. So really fun, just a little kind of behind the scenes information. And I also chat with you guys more. So if you hit me up on Patreon, you're more likely to hear from me quicker and have a conversation or whatnot. So it's been fun to kind of talk to my Patreon supporters. So I had a really good month in regards to new Patreon supporters. I still don't have a whole lot, but I had a good month in regards to new people. And I'm getting tons of downloads. So I know you guys are listening. I'm getting tons of feedback in regards to messages on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, of people who are loving the show and getting value out of it. So if you get value out of the show, like I've been saying a lot of late, let's try to do this value for value system where if you get value, try to give some value back. And it doesn't have to be equal. It doesn't have to be money. It just has to be some type of value in regards to, and I shouldn't say it just has to be, because it doesn't have to be, but I would like you to help support the show so I can continue doing this. And you can rate the show, review the show, tell your friends about the show. These are all ways of giving some value to it. I know that the future is uncertain, and with all the depression, anxiety, and the uncertainty of the future and people losing their jobs or whatnot, it's hard to give money. And this is why I've entertained the idea of going to Rockfin, like a lot of people in the alternative media world has of late, because I do want to support companies like them that are willing to take on alternative media people and people who are going against the grain and have been censored on other platforms. But I don't want to suppress these conversations, and I don't want to make it any harder for anybody to get these conversations. I don't want anybody to have to pay to get these conversations. So that's why I'm trying to put this stuff out for free and let you guys upload it, spread it. Like I keep telling you guys, it's open source, put it anywhere, and hoping that getting these conversations out there and people realizing the importance of what I'm attempting to do, that will give you some little bit of motivation and desire to support what I'm doing. And that's either with Patreon, PayPal, or my merch store, which is the Ripple Effect Podcast, merch.com. So I think I'm done with my whole spiel. We'll enjoy the conversation, guys. I have plenty of guests that I've emailed of late, and I'm talking to, and a bunch of interviews too that I'll be doing soon. So hopefully I'll update you guys with some of that, or just follow me on social media, and I'm always sharing the interviews that I've done. Some of my favorite conversations in the last month or two has been not on my show, it has been on other people's shows. So definitely check out some of those interviews I'm doing. And like I said, if you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Parlor, whatever social media platform you're on, if any, then usually I'm sharing those interviews, so you can keep up with that. Also on my YouTube channel, I do have an interview playlist and a Union of the Unwanted playlist. So if you're ever looking for just a list of all my interviews, go on our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, or just search Ripple Effect Podcast. I have an interview playlist. I have a Union of the Unwanted playlist where it's all the Union of the Unwanted playlist. I'm having a hard time getting that whole title out, but I also have a documentary playlist, which I haven't checked in a while, and I remember since I started, I've had issues with documentaries disappearing, and with all the censorship being completely off the walls, I'm sure many of those documentaries are disappearing. But go there. I'm sure there's still plenty of really interesting documentaries if you're looking for something interesting on YouTube to watch. Go there. And now I think I'm finally done. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, weekend, week, whenever you're listening to this, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Turn up my volume a little bit. Yeah, okay, we're set.
Yeah, you sound good. I think I sound good.
Yeah, you're looking good.
I'm trying to. I live in Massachusetts, so our days are getting short, so I'm trying to get as much sun as possible. But it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I spent years in Philadelphia, so it's not too far south from Boston. I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah,
There's cold, East Coast winters. Cold, short, dark, that bone-chilling dampness. The whole way from Boston down through New York, right down to Maryland, really.
And depressing. I think that's the big part too. It's just the winters are just, and this is some of the stuff, we can talk about in the show, because all these things are so crucial in regards to your mental and physical health. And you kind of take it for granted, just the power of sunlight and being outside, and just how, it just puts you in a better mood. And if you're in a better mood, you feel better, the mind-body connection. It's, I can see as, I'm not that old, but I can see as people get older, why they want to migrate to Florida and whatnot. Because the winters just get tougher and tougher. And not so much just in regards to like plowing snow and stuff, but I think the mental aspect of it, and the lack of vitamin D and the lack of being able to go outside and sweat and all those crucial parts of just having and living a happy and healthy life.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I love being in the sunlight. But that being said, one of the happiest groups on Earth were the Icelanders. And they are pitch black not pitch black. Certain parts of Iceland are pitch black all winter long for 6 months. Finland, I was in Finland. They're perennially considered some of the happiest people on Earth. Norwegians, Finns, Icelanders. I don't know how they do it. But yes,
well, it's something. I think it has something.
You hear in Scotland and Ireland, similar latitude, the people are very depressed and really hit the alcohol pretty hard. So I don't know what the answer is to that. Must be genetics, I suppose.
Well, it could be, but it also could be something else, and something that I've heard you. For years, I've been a fan of your work. I've seen you on Rogan. I've seen you on London Real. I've seen you on plenty of podcasts that I'm a fan of, and something you talk about, which I think is important. And I think the thing is, when people think about like a health expert, a lot of times it's like, well, tell me what to eat, tell me what exercises to do. But you touch on a lot of other things that I think are crucial for mental and physical health that people don't take in consideration. And, you've talked about like happiness and materialism. And I think that's something that is prevalent and maybe a bigger part of our lives in America than in other parts of the world. Like I was born in Portugal, and my dad was raised on a farm. You know, he was one of 12. My mom was one of 7. They didn't have any running water. They, you know, they didn't have a bathroom. They didn't, you know, they had an outhouse or whatever it's called. And you know, we talk about how he was almost happier then, and you came to America to gain some type of material wealth, but you've lost all these other things. That to gain that material wealth comes with the sacrifice, and you end up having less time to do all the other things that made you happy before you had all that material wealth. So in a way, it's almost like you get tricked into believing, and I've heard you say this too in the past, you know, you get this idea of like, okay, this road is what will lead you to happiness. If you just get that, you know, that high paying job where you can buy that new car and you can get that white picket fence, then you know, you put all those things in place, and then happiness will just come. And I think a lot of times people aren't happy because they're searching for happiness in the wrong places. So it's the combination of like East Coast, very fast-paced lifestyle. You know, it's go, go, go. You don't have time for anything. Don't have time for hobbies. You eat on the go. You know, everybody's working overtime. And then you combine that with you know, the crappy weather, the lack of sun, the lack of being outside. And I think maybe it's a cocktail of everything.
Well, just as you said, and you know, many people have said, your things are not what makes you happy. The things that you get in the material sense. I mean, this has been proven. There's a lot of miserable people out there that are very wealthy, but I think the lack of creative self-expression is probably one of the biggest causes of happiness. You have to find some form of creative self-expression, and whether you make a living or out of it, or you do it as a hobby, everyone has to find that inner creative self. And I think that's really, really important. And I don't believe you can have true happiness until you have some form of that creative self-expression. And all these other things are just a mere substitute. I think that's one reason why people get into overeating and over drinking. You know, they have this hole, this void, and they're trying to fill it with something. You know, people get addicted to buying things and clothing and, you know, shoes and you know, amassing all this materialism, and it's never the answer. And, you know, it always is shocking when you hear of a famous star. Well, even fame isn't really necessarily the answer either. I mean, how many times do you read about a famous star or singer that commits suicide, you know? And it's always shocking. It's like, wow, they seem like they had it all, you know? They're beautiful, and, you know, they have a beautiful husband, a beautiful wife, and, you know, they have the mansion with all the stuff. How could they not be happy? But it's that finding fulfillment in either your job or your profession or some type of creative outlet, self-expression, is absolutely essential, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think in everybody's opinion, I constantly tell people on this podcast, like, go out, find time, stop procrastinating, and find time to do things that you enjoy, like things that are creative. You know, if you like to paint, if you like to, you know, make things out of wood, if you like to, whatever it is, find time to do that stuff, because you'll be a better person. You'll be a healthier person. You'll be, I think, you can't even quantify how much it helps you. I mean, I started this podcast for that reason. I mean, I have a full-time job, which I hate, and I felt unfulfilled. And it was one of those things where, you know, 7 years ago, I mean, one of the biggest influences of mine was listening to Joe Rogan and listening to conversations with you and all these interesting people he had on. And I'm a musician too. I used to write music and play music. I'm like, I already have the equipment. I'm like, you know what? Let me give it a try. And I remember when I started it, it was like, I don't care if anybody listens. I just feel awesome giving, you know, that I have a purpose, and I have a place to be creative and use imagination and challenge ideas and share ideas and provoke thought. And I'm like, you know, success is in the eyes of the beholder. It's different for everybody. You know, it's not success for somebody might be making tons of money doing a show or doing whatever. But for me, it's like just me taking those first baby steps of actually doing it and having these conversations was successful for me. It was I felt better. I felt like I'm accomplishing something. I'm elite, and that's why I called it the ripple effect, because I truly believe in the ripple effect, that no matter how little you think of an impact you might have on the world, unless you actually attempt to do something, you don't know how far that ripple will go or how big it'll be. But we can all have a ripple effect, of positive conversations and sharing ideas. You don't know who you're impacting and how you're impacting them. So, and this podcast has kind of become an example of it, because when I started in the same basement, and I did it because I felt unfulfilled doing the typical 40 hours a week job, and I'm just like, what am I doing? I don't have purpose, and this was before I had kids. When I had kids, maybe it would have changed a little bit. Maybe I would have found purpose in that, and I would have procrastinated the podcast a little more. But I'm like, I have to do something. I either have to get back into music, I have to do something to give me purpose. And you even saw it with the lockdown. Like, a lot of people who didn't even like their job, just because they were forced to stay home and do nothing, they felt like they were missing something. Like they wanted to go out and do something, just because they didn't have purpose. Even though it's the idea of getting a check every week and staying home and doing nothing sounds great, I think a lot of people realize real quickly how that's not what it seems to be.
But there was an awful lot of people that really loved it too.
Yeah,
Not having to get up and go and do anything either.
But do you think that would be temporary?
For me personally, it was great. After traveling the globe as long as I did, it was just great staying in one spot, not having to do anything, not having to go anywhere. Of course, like you say, that after about a year of that, I was ready to get up and get moving again. But you mentioned having kids. A lot of people, they have kids in this effort to find fulfillment, but you can't do that through your kids. You really can't.
That's true.
A lot of people that put a lot of this time and energy into their children, it's misspent, in my opinion. I think you can't use your kid as, you can't live vicariously through your children's accomplishments and so forth. You got to find your own. I think another aspect too, it's kind of related to fulfillment, is you got to keep learning, finding new things to learn to keep your brain sharp. My girlfriend, for example, started taking Russian. She got, I wouldn't say fluent, but she certainly could hold simple conversations. That's a hard language to learn, man. And she mastered the Cyrillic alphabet. And she was able to read signs and, read headlines off newspapers. And I was really impressed. And then when we were on lockdown, she started taking piano lessons. She always wanted to take piano. She always felt like she just was missing something in her musical education. So, these are things that anyone can do. Go out and take a creative writing course. There's a lot of things, interesting things that people can do that are very fulfilling and very good for preserving your mentality, stimulating the brain cells, keeping you young, both physically and mentally. So, for sure.
Is there any aspects of all the things you've learned throughout the years? Because, you've been in fitness and nutrition and exercise since, before I was born. I was born in 85. I think you were doing this in like the early 70s or mid 70s. So, you've been around the block for a long time, and there's been a lot of trends throughout the years, right? Like you see it in fitness. I see it all the time. I've had a gym membership since I was in my early teens, and you'll see like this is the new trend, and you see the trainers make all the, everybody they're training do the same exercises because it's a new trend. Then they move on to the next thing and they move on. But then a lot of people who are in the best shape have been doing a lot of the same stuff for a long time. And so I think sometimes it you can learn some things throughout the years, but I think some things probably stay true for a long time. Do you, obviously you've seen these trends. Is there any type of like tips or things that you've learned throughout the years that have stuck with you that has been a part of your daily routine or weekly routine with staying in shape? Are there specific exercises? Is there a certain amount of exercise you do? How maybe focusing on stretching? Any of those things, like anything that you do consistently every week that you think is probably one of the most important things that you've learned throughout the years?
Well, the things that you're referring to as trends, I call them fads. Faddish. you know, and it's because people have this notion that they need to change things all the time. It's simply untrue. You really don't. And in truth, the amount of exercise that you need is pretty small. You don't need to exercise a lot. And people shouldn't be exercising as a hobby. You need a recreational activity or a sport. But don't try to use weight training and the gym as your hobby. This is where people get into overtraining and overuse. Every time they go in the gym, you know, they'll do all these trendy things and end up creating a lot of micro traumas and subacute injuries that they don't feel. It's like smoking, right? You can smoke every day for a long time and not seem to suffer until you do. And then all of a sudden you're diagnosed with lung cancer. It's the same thing with a lot of these fattish exercises, box jumps and explosive lifts and, you know, some of these more dangerous type activities. And people do them and so forth. And they feel fine. They feel great, you know, get all the feel-good hormones going. Right up until the day that they blow a hamstring or their back goes out. And they don't understand the cause and effect, that injury had been building for months, maybe years, before it finally manifested. So you want to keep your exercise brief, infrequent, and very intense. And you really don't need to strength train much more than once or twice a week, especially once you're over 65 as I am. I'll be 68 and just December 3rd, actually.
Wow.
My 68th birthday. And for me, exercise isn't fun. It's not something I do for recreation. I do it because I know I should, and I do it because I know I need to. Probably one of the most important things you can do to preserve your youth and slow down the aging process is try to keep your muscles as strong as absolutely possible, particularly your grip. And then the other stuff like mobility and stretching, if you enjoy going out and walking or running or riding your bike or whatever, you can do that pretty much every day. I call that non-exercise activity because by nature, it doesn't fit the definition of exercise. The true definition of exercise is basically strength training. You know, there is aerobic training, but I look at that as more recreational. And, you know, just because you walk or run doesn't make you good at swimming. And just because you swim doesn't make you good at playing tennis. I mean, each one of those things has a specific skill set and a specific type of conditioning. So pick the activity that you enjoy, that you like. If you don't like any of them, it's fine. Go out and just walk. You know, just enjoy nature, breathe the fresh air. You don't have to become a slave to the gym. But I see a lot of guys, you know, especially guys that have a propensity for putting on muscular size and strength. They love being in the gym, you know, looking in the mirrors. And it's probably the worst thing that you can do for longevity and for just I just see those guys getting into trouble once they get in their late 40s, early 50s. All those guys end up with a lot of osteoarthritis and so forth with the heavy weight and the excessive sets and reps and so forth.
Well, you said your exercise should be intense. So it should be intense, but you shouldn't do too much of it. Is that what you mean?
Brief and intense. Yeah, I subscribe to the high intensity training method where you're pretty much doing one and done, one really hard all out set. Doesn't matter whether it be dumbbells, barbells, machines, isometrics, body weight calisthenics. It just doesn't matter. You know, brief, intense. My workouts usually take about 20 minutes, but you know, I don't feel like doing anything more. And people I put through these workouts, they never say, "Is that it? Can I do more?" They're always like, "Holy shit, when's this going to end?"
Yeah.
And it needs to be that way to stimulate a training effect in my body, especially as you get a little bit older. And as long as you maintain really good form on the exercise, you can push yourself very, very hard. But you need that stimulus. It's all about the stimulus. And then the rest, Mother Nature takes care of through rest. So I'll rest and I'll make sure I get plenty of recuperation until the next time. Now, that doesn't mean I don't do anything. I still teach Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been specializing more and more towards the self-defense. And not doing the more competitive jiu-jitsu roles as much anymore. I still get on the mat with trusted partners, but you got to be really careful at my age that, an injury pretty much will, stay with you for the rest of your life. As you get older, it gets harder and harder to recover from this type of injuries. So, but I still enjoy it. I still like playing the chess match with good partners that are careful and have really good technique and so forth. So these are my recreations. There's a huge disconnect in people's mind between exercise versus recreation. To some people, everything from walking the dog to having sex to mowing the lawn is exercise. It is not. It doesn't meet the standard definition of exercise. It's non-exercise activity. And then there are some exercise benefits, obviously, from running and swimming and biking and so forth. You do get some exercise benefit, but they don't meet the definition of exercise, all these other recreational pursuits. That's not to minimize the importance of recreation. I exercise so I can recreate, but I don't try to use recreation as my exercise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Well, I mean, I love playing sports. I love the competitiveness of it. I love the chess match of it. And I love just giving me a purpose to push myself to the max and getting that better workout. Like during this lockdown thing, it was driving me crazy. We couldn't, I play basketball. I play a little bit of soccer. Being Portuguese, I have to. It's against my religion not to play soccer. So I do play a little bit of soccer. But we couldn't find anywhere to play, and we were going I was going crazy. I'm just like, I need to because even if I was finding ways of working out at home using dumbbells or whatever, it just a couple times a week I was playing some type of sport that was giving me that type of workout that I could not recreate at the gym. The one that was 2 hours of just sweating and you're just being so tired that you're like, wow, that was a good workout. And I hate the treadmill. I hate running at the gym. I mean, 1 minute feels like 1 hour, but yet I could run 3 hours playing soccer and the time just flies by. So and I think a lot of people learned how important the gym was, or just working out in general was, to their mental health and their physical health and their psyche during the lockdown. My gym was one of the last gyms to shut down, and they really did. I give them a lot of credit because they did everything in their power to try to stay open, and they were counting people and making people wait, to not go over a certain amount of people in the gym or whatever, really going over and beyond to try to keep the gym open. And we were one of the last gyms in the area. I think we were the last gym in the area that were open. And everybody I would talk to at the gym would say the same thing. They're like, what the hell am I going to do when this place shuts down? This is my therapy. This gives me some time to reflect. This gives me some time to get some tension out. This gives me, it kind of is that little bit of time where you disconnect from all the other aspects of life, maybe stresses or whatnot. And so many of us were talking about this. Isn't, when you're young, you want to be the biggest guy, you want to be the best looking guy, you want to be the leanest guy. And when you get a little older, you realize I'm not coming here for just my physical. I mean, mostly it's not physical at all. It has to do with the mental aspect of it, how mentally I'm a better person when I get to relieve some of that energy, that built up energy. I get, I'm a better father, I'm a better husband, I'm a better friend. And yeah, I mean, so it's just exercise. I think during this whole lockdown, people realized how crucial it was. I mean, people were getting so creative with finding ways to work out because they couldn't just say, hey, I'm going to take a month off or 2 months off. No, everybody was going crazy. I remember going to the park with my kids at the height of this lockdown. People were bringing their whole dumbbell sets and bench press, all this stuff. And they were getting together with friends at the park, working out outside. And it's just I remember just thinking to myself, I'm like, this is how important it is that people will find a way to do something, because doing nothing sounds like a great idea for a little bit of time, and then eventually you go crazy. So I think a lot of people realize how important it is.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit of a contrarian. I'm not a gym guy. I don't like gyms.
I know you don't.
I find they're definitely not conducive to serious workouts. Too much the blasting music, the TVs, people preening and primping in the mirror, girls taking selfies of their butts on the machines, to post on social media. It's just a circus. Now, there are good gyms. There are good gyms. And, I apologize to gym owners that run a good gym. I ran a gym in Philadelphia called Maxwell for almost 20 years.
Great
And
name.
it was a great gym. And there was no shenanigans going on in there. There was no loud music and, no ferns and chrome and
Well,
we
Mark
did have
Bet,
mirrors.
you did, yeah. Well, it helps with
But
form, right?
it was it was a serious gym, but you don't find too many of those. A lot of these gyms are basically they sell you memberships and hope you never show up. Basically,
Yeah, that's true.
they make their money in numbers. But even when I owned my gym, I got my best workouts at home. I had equipment at home, and I enjoyed working out in my backyard in my house in Philadelphia. I had like a row house with a really nice little backyard that I had set up. And also during the winter, I had a little setup inside. I used to like to watch my Philadelphia Eagles and train during the NFL game sometimes. Or I come home from work and rest up a little bit and then just work out at home. I always got much better workouts by myself. I could concentrate, no distractions, no phones ringing, nothing. And I've always been a cellar dweller or a garage griller, one of these living room denizens. I always enjoyed those type of workouts way more. And of course, when I could in good weather, I always enjoyed getting outside. And so I've always been big into calisthenics and body weight training. And lately, I've been really pushing the isometrics. I was doing isometrics way back in the 60s, 64, 65, 66 as a high school wrestler. And they were great. And I don't know, it's like a lot of good ideas. You wonder why you ever stopped. And just recently, I've been really, really doing a lot of isometrics again. And of course, I don't know whether your audience knows what I've been up to, but I was a nomad, a digital nomad for almost the last 13, 14 years, where I didn't have a home base. I just lived in Airbnbs and hotels all over the world, Australia, China, Russia, Middle East, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Bahrain, all over Europe, Scandinavia, Mexico. So I was all over the place, Canada. And I couldn't afford to bring anything with me. I was very much into being a minimalist packer as well. And I lived out of one bag all those years, pretty much with the kind of clothes that's where they would do triple duty. It was my travel outfit. It was my workout outfit. And also like just going out. So
Well, didn't you have these?
I'm a real expert on technical clothes that can do it all, man. I could steer anyone towards some really good websites.
Well, I remember you talking about some shirts, right? Because there was something that was in the fabric, some iron or something so it wouldn't smell.
Silver.
Okay.
Silver threads, silver impregnated. So Lululemon actually makes great shirts that way, but a lot of companies do it now. But yeah, there's some really, really awesome clothing. So, 2 pair of pants, 2 pair of shorts, 4 t-shirts, a pair of sandals, like the running sandals, that you can run in, do stuff in, hike in them, and then a pair of regular shoes. And that pretty much carried me. And then, warm jacket or medium layer, like a hoodie, technical hoodie. And I lived that way for years and years and years. So I was basically a minimalist at heart. And also part of that travel kit was my workout gear. And I was able to give myself complete workouts in any hotel room or Airbnb anywhere in the world with just a simple loading strap and this little suspension device that I had made myself out of climber's cord and PVC. And a jump rope. I still like to skip rope now and again. And I got unbelievable workouts just with that very simple bunch of equipment. So, you don't need fancy equipment. And in some ways, it's more of a distraction than not. And sometimes some gyms have so much equipment, it's overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. And people, they just get really confused. But basically, all you need is a handful of basic compound movements. Compound meaning, multi-joint push-ups, pull-ups, body weight rows, some type of shoulder press. It could be pike push-ups or Hindu push-ups or handstand push-ups if you're strong enough. You can throw dips in there as a substitute for push-ups, body weight squats, and some type of hinging movement. And if you can't hinge, you can always do back extensions and sit-ups and so forth for your torso muscles. And then work grip, forearms, neck with isometrics, and never neglect the feet and calf muscles. So you can have wonderful workouts in minimum space, minimum equipment. I mean, you could have a workout in a jail cell if you know what you're doing. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the gyms, even though I was a former gym owner. And for some people, I think the gym is a great place, to socialize and get out, especially if they're stuck in the office all day. But for me, I just love the freedom of not being around anyone and just having my privacy and just being able to really concentrate on these workouts that I do.
Yeah, well, I definitely, I agree with you in many of the things you said. I guess my only point about bringing up the gym was just, it was more of a reflection of how people kind of learned how, because most people worked out at a gym and not home, and then they took basically their ability to go to the gym and work out. They realized how important working out was in their lives. No,
it's a good point.
Yeah.
I was being a bit of a contrarian.
No, it's okay. No, I love. Believe me, this is a place. I do these shows where it's called the Union of the Unwanted, where I bring a bunch of people together, and we and it's all different types of people from all different backgrounds and different researchers, and that's kind of the idea. Is and I've even hosted debates on this show and friendly debates, just people just kind of challenging ideas. So I love that aspect of it. I think the world needs more of people who know how to civilly challenge each other's ideas, because I think a lot of times when your ideas are challenged, that's when you really find out, like, okay, why do I believe this? If I can't verbalize it, if I can't explain it, then maybe I should rethink, why I have these thoughts or why I've taken this side or whatnot. So I think it's very important for people to be, friendly in regards to doing it, but people should also be able to have their ideas challenged without getting defensive and upset or whatnot. Because I think that's how we learn. You learn a lot from listening and having your ideas challenged and listening to people with different perspectives. So it's completely on this show. I'm open to that whole aspect of it. But one thing you said too that was really important is like foot strength. That's something that I've always found fascinating, because some of these things like strength and foot strength, especially in gyms, are completely neglected. I mean, everybody just wants giant biceps or giant chest or shoulders or traps, which is kind of a useless muscle. But these other things are kind of neglected. And I remember when Conor McGregor, I've had a few MMA guys on the show, and I'm a big fan of MMA. And I remember Conor McGregor when he was on his way up, and he was doing all the movement stuff, and he was doing everything barefooted, and he was doing the exercises for foot strength or whatnot. I mean, that's something that people kind of take for granted, is that your foot muscles will also get fatigued. And when you're talking about MMA and striking, a lot of that power starts from the ground up and works its way up when you twist and you torque. So, you never hear of anybody working on their feet strength. But I remember talking to a good friend of mine. He actually used to be the co-host on this show with me, and he was a triathlon. He did triathlons, and it was awesome at all different types of physical activity. And he talked about when he would go to Hawaii, how he would go, barefooted places on rocks or whatnot, and he'd be with people that are like completely fine, and his feet would be sore and hurting, and he would realize, like, holy crap, like, being barefoot has actually increased the strength of their feet, and me having comfortable shoes all the time has weakened my feet. And it kind of reminded me of, like, oh yeah, like Conor McGregor, like he kind of put a focus on foot strength. Do you think that's like something that's neglected in MMA, or is that something you've thought about?
In life.
In general?
I mean, think about the types of shoes people cram their feet into. Women with high-heeled shoes. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a woman in high heels like any.
I was just going to say.
It makes the calf and leg look gorgeous, the way they're
and longer, yeah.
you know, yeah, I have a keen appreciation for the female form, but they're harmful. You know,
Yeah.
the pelvic tilt, the shortening of the Achilles. Uh, think of it this way: what happens when you put your arm in a sling or a cast? Right? It withers, it becomes weak, and when they take that cast off, the muscles have completely atrophied. Well, that's what's happening when these people wear these over-engineered running shoes with the arch supports and all this padding and all this stuff. The feet no longer have to work and they become flaccid and weak. And then all of the tension goes into the knees and the hips and the lower back. So you end up manifesting knee and hip problems when in reality, it was because you were over relying on these big, thick, padded, over engineered shoes. I'm a big minimalist when it comes to shoes. You might say barefoot shoes, which is an oxymoron. It's barefooter is a shoe, but you know they call it, the movement was called barefoot shoes. I've always been an advocate of very minimal shoes with no arch supports, nothing. But you know, I'm not telling people to go and just throw their shoes and just jump right into it. You got to kind of work your feet into it. And there are foot and ankle exercises that I do pretty frequently, like a maintenance kind of thing. I stretch my feet, especially being a jiu-jitsu man. You know, you got to keep your feet and ankles stretched out. And I do exercises. I was just walking on the beach today here. I'm in on Folly Island, South Carolina, near Charleston, and I've been here for about a month now. And I've been barefoot, either running or walking in the sand. Fantastic for the feet, articulating the toes and the feet. And of course, I stretch the feet rigorously. I have, in an effort to build up from years of wearing the type of shoe I just mentioned, I was doing toe curls and toe extensions, a lot of foot and ankle exercises to build the feet up. And now I pretty much just wear these running sandals. They're like a flat running sandal. They're called bedrock sandals. But there's a bunch of brands out there. Shama makes an awesome running sandal. They're based on the Tarahumara Indian sandals, like a Hirachi style sandal. The Luna sandals, fantastic. People can Google those running sandals or minimalist sandals. And I try to wear those as much as possible. And then when it gets cold, I wear Vivo Barefoot shoes. It's a company from London. And they make these awesome, very stylish, great looking minimal shoes. They don't look like normal sneakers. They don't look like this freaky 5-finger toe shoes, you know. They look like normal shoes. But there's no arch supports or no support. You don't want a supportive shoe. You want your feet to be strong enough that the support is your own metatarsals and the muscles of the feet.
Yeah, well, I think
And that can't happen when you wear an over-engineered shoe or any shoe with a heel on it. Throws your whole gait off.
Well, being a basketball fan, I remember growing up, and I remember thinking like, "Oh my God, these guys used to play with these flat Converse. How do they do it? You know, all these old basketball players." And then you realize like the reason why somebody today can't do it is because they've lost all their foot strength because they were adapted to that, and then we've weakened our feet to, you know, like you said, with these over-engineered shoes. And there's a book, I don't know if it's Learn to Run or something like that, about
to Run.
Born to Run, yes.
Born to Run with by Christopher McDougall. Good book.
Which goes into the history of the shoe and Nike and how they kind of is that the one that goes into how they kind of messed up our mechanics, right?
Absolutely. They started teaching people to run on their heels and all sorts of stuff. Although now that I've been doing more research, there are natural peoples that actually are natural heel strikers.
Really?
Yeah, but you can't do it unless you're in dirt or sand or soft material. Obviously, you wouldn't run barefoot like that as a heel striker on concrete.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't recommend anyway, if you can possibly help it. You know, run on trails or beach or grass or whatever if you can.
Do you think
a little easier on the body?
Do you think that's why? I'm sure you've seen this with babies. They naturally, when they first learn to walk or learning to walk. I remember with my kids, they were always on their toes. They're on the their toes. And I remember my mother being like, "Why are they walking like that?" She'd be pushing their heel down. I'm like, "Listen. The rest of the society will teach them how to run a walk on their heels." I'm like, "Let them walk on their toes for as long as they want to." And even like when we say, "Oh, he's always on his toes," what do we mean? Like he's quick. It's like we understand we're saying these things and we don't even realize what we're saying, that it's like, okay, we're actually quicker when we're on the ball of our feet compared to, like you said, heel first, which in the natural world, if we didn't have shoes, we would never run heel first. It would hurt. It'd make more sense. Yeah. It would
You kind of sense where the stones and things are, and you can kind of roll the foot when, people think that you could easily get hurt when you're running with minimal shoes, but you don't at all. Even I know some people that are 100% run barefoot and they're fine. I'm not quite that brave.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty minimal with what I wear, and I will run completely barefoot in the beach. And even though there's little broken shells and stones, it doesn't bother you. My father grew up in a farm in West Virginia. He was born in the 20s. And he said he didn't wear shoes until he was 12 years old.
Wow.
He went to school, like a one-room schoolhouse with the local kids. And none of the kids wore shoes. Well, in winter, they would wear.
Well, my parents are the same way. They're farmers from northern Portugal. Where I was born in Chaves, but we're from a smaller village nearby. And same thing. Like, I mean, they still have shoes from Portugal that they brought over here that are wooden shoes that they just like because it reminds them of back home and whatnot. And I mean, but they didn't have issues, So there's a lot of things that it's funny. Like I'm a big fan of Christopher Ryan. He's been on the show. He wrote Sex at Dawn and Civilized to Death, and he talks a lot about like our primitive ancestors and whatnot. And it's so weird because we like to think we're progressing, and in so many cases you're like, oh, they had it right, they figured it out, and then we've kind of lost. We're trying to reinvent the wheel, and then we end up with some shittier version of the wheel, not a better version of it. And you see that, like I'm sure you've heard people who have the theory that like our diet, because we have less protein and fats in our diet, it has an effect on your hormones and your testosterone levels, which means we have more narrow faces instead of wider faces, which is people think is why all our teeth when they come in don't fit in our mouths. And you look at like other people before us, they did. So you look at like, our diet, our exercise, you look at, for people who are listening who don't know, I mean, you're one of the first people, I think, in the US that were teaching kettlebells and really pushing that in the US. And now that's come back around. It's very popular because they realize like all this stuff that, like you said, all this expensive gym equipment, you don't feel as good. You're not getting functional strength. You don't feel stronger in everyday life when you're doing those workouts. But the kettlebell stuff, which is more similar to, when we're hunter gatherers and we're picking things up and having to use all muscles, actually is a better workout. So in many cases it's almost like, instead of looking at our ancestors like they were less intelligent than us, maybe we should take some of the wisdom from them.
Well, for sure, people were very smart and very clever, and just because we have a lot of technical knowledge and book learning smarts doesn't mean we're more intelligent by any stretch of the imagination. They had survival skills. You take the average person. Well, you could take any child of a hunter-gatherer society and leave them out in the wilderness, and they could find their way to safety. And they could certainly feed themselves and start a fire, and they'd be fine. You take any modern teenager out in the woods, and they would die from fright probably, quicker than anything. They'd be lucky if they last a couple of days. So, that is the type of intelligence, that was hardwired into a lot of the primitive people. But I don't believe that we should adopt primitive ways. Those people had very hard lives, and they had pretty short lifespans. And they did a lot of that stuff because they had to do it, not because it was necessarily good for them. So, anything that makes you stronger is functional. This whole functional training thing is a myth. swinging a sledgehammer on a tire is a stupid exercise. It's a very poor way to load the involved muscles. It makes you better at swinging a sledgehammer. There is some small amount of strength transfer, but in truth, a well-designed machine, whether it be hammer strength or Nautilus or whatever, is a very functional exercise if it makes you stronger, because it'll enable you to do other skills and tasks easier. But I don't believe in going back and just running around the woods in a loincloth and training just because our ancestors did. They did it because they had no other choice. But, you know, we do have a choice. And a lot of those things were life shortening and in some cases life threatening. So I'm not a big one on, you know, like going back and trying to duplicate ancient hunter-gatherer workouts. For the most part, we don't know what they did anyway. So conjecture. And I guarantee none of those people actually exercised. Their day-to-day hunter-gatherer lifestyle was so absolutely strenuous. They didn't have any energy for working out. They didn't need to, man.
I know there's some debate in regards to life expectancy. I guess some people have said that the birth, like if you remove the people who are dying right after birth, which was, you know, kind of common back in the day, people, you know, dying, you know, babies dying at birth or whatnot, they say that the life expectancy is actually not that much lower than what it is today. Like that it was actually I think I heard Christopher Ryan talk about this, but I'm sure you've heard that people
the maximum lifespan really hasn't changed that much. It's just that fewer people got there.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah,
an accident was a death sentence. A bad accident, a fall, a broken bone, you're pretty much screwed. I'm not a big believer in Western medicine, but one thing that is amazing now is battlefield medicine and emergency medicine. Amazing what they can do. I mean, they can literally take an arm and sew it back on and have it work again. That's
wild.
Incredible. You know, but
I agree with you. I'm not in emergency cases. I completely agree. I think there's plenty of great things from Western medicine. I think it's completely overreached into our lives where, you know, when you were growing up, they used to, you know, your doctor used to ask you, are you on any prescription drugs? Today, a doctor asks, how many prescription drugs are you on? You know, it's, you know, it's crazy. And then every prescription drug has all these side effects that leads to this, leads to that. And it's just, you know, people, it's sad that people don't look at, and a lot of it's from like the history of the Rockefeller Foundation and the AMA and how they've kind of made functional medicine a pseudoscience, and anything that's like plant medicines or whatnot is like a pseudoscience. It's not really considered medicine, where for many years and in many different cultures for thousands of years, teas, root extracts. I mean, they consider these things medicines. Now, if it's not made in a lab by some chemical company, it's not medicine.
And you can't even blame the doctors for that. It's the drug cartel, the pharmaceutical companies. You know, big pharma. You know, they're a bunch of greedy dudes, man. I'm sure there's plenty of well-meaning people in that business, but for the most part, they just have almost unlimited power. Just incredible power in America. And they pretty much run the medical industry.
Absolutely.
And they're going to push these medications and medicine and so forth on people. But that's a sticky wicket there, boy. You can get in some hot debates. Some of the most vicious arguments I've ever heard were about nutrition, and exercise, and pharmaceuticals. Man, you get people pretty worked up. And people get very emotional about the whole thing. But for me, personally, I haven't seen a doctor in 35 years. I haven't had a checkup. I feel great. I haven't been sick in 15 years. And I attribute it to an impeccable diet and my exercise regimen and a very calm demeanor. And the fact that I just don't have a belief system that believes in sickness and illness and ill health. A lot of it has to do with your thought process and your belief system. You know, people that believe in this kind of stuff are frequently ill. I've been around people that have been sick, and I didn't get sick. I was flying for the last 15 years, and the filthiest place on earth is airports and airlines. The little pocket and the tray tables, and there's bathrooms in those planes loaded with bacteria and viruses and germs. Yet I didn't get sick, and I attribute it to a very strong immune system. And why? Because I get like 8 to 9 hours sleep every night. Very, like I said, very strict with the diet, and get plenty of exercise and sunlight. And you combine that together, and you can have a very, very strong immune system and resist just about anything.
Well, I think during this whole lockdown, we used to. I've been one of those people that I've been preaching, having people on about big pharma issues, and I've had Del Bigtree on, I've had Dr. Brzezinski on years ago, I've had so many different people to talk, kind of in this world of big pharma, and they are one of the scariest cartels in the world because their influence on everything is just. I mean, I think people don't really comprehend. Like when I was growing up, and even when you were growing up, like the biggest threat to humanity seemed like the military-industrial complex, and now it's like, forget the military-industrial complex. I'm like, if we're in Syria or we're not in Syria, it doesn't affect your everyday life. But what the pill pushers are affecting your loved ones, their life expectancy, because they're on too many freaking drugs. They're, I don't stray away from the vaccine issue either. My kids are unvaccinated. I'm unvaccinated.
Mine were too, by the way.
Yeah.
These horses.
Yeah.
My wife and I went round and round. She believed in all that nonsense, and I said, nope. I actually had to sign a religious waiver.
Yeah. Religious. No, my kids.
I didn't want my kids to. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was gonna. No, sorry. No, good. No, I was just gonna say I have religious exemption forms that I give to my well, when they were going to school. Now they're homeschooled because I don't want them wearing masks in school. And but yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm the same way. The reason why sometimes my wife's like you said, some of these topics people get very emotional, they get very defensive or whatnot. One of the reasons why I'm so outspoken about my being unvaccinated is because, like I've told people on the show, and I've told friends of mine, I've told my wife, the pediatrician will scare the shit out of you until you finally do it. So when you hear that, like yourself and like myself, that people have lived their lives and not got vaccinated and are fine, so all the bad things are going to happen to you for not vaccinating, is something that you should consider, that there's a risk maybe both ways. And that's always been my argument with this, because I'm very passionate with this whole vaccine issue. I'm not pro-vaccine. I'm not anti-vaccine. My biggest issue with it, and what really the only thing that gets me worked up, isn't me saying, pushing vaccines or being anti-vaccines. What gets me worked up is the fact that people don't have access to all the information. To me, you've seen big pharma the same way the military industrial complex can sell the public lies and sell them into wars. The big pharma can sell you into believing that the science is settled. There's no side effects, even though it says on the inserts there's side effects. And that there's a huge risk in not vaccinating your kids, and there's a huge risk if you don't vaccinate your kids, and there's minimal to no risk if you do vaccinate your kids. And to me, it's like, I want people to have both sides of the argument, because we're only as good as the information we have access to. And when you don't have all the information to come to your own conclusions, then I think that's the issue. I've had parents come to me and like, oh my God, after hearing your show with, I had Dr. Brian Hooker on. He was he was the doctor who talked to Dr. William Thompson, who worked at the CDC, who was the CDC whistleblower. I don't know if you're familiar with the story. So the CDC had a study that Dr. William Thompson was the author of that showed some link between some vaccines and autistic symptoms, and they completely suppressed that from the public. Well, Dr. William Hooker, he's a scientist, understands the literature, understands how to read these studies, contacted CDC because he thought his child might have had some negative effect to a vaccine, and he wanted to see, well, I'm good at reading science, and we're good at reading literature. Let me see if I can see what studies they have to show that it wasn't the vaccine, that it is safe and effective. And then luckily he gets contacted by Dr. William Thompson, who has this guilt building up about this study that he was the author of that was suppressed to the public. And then eventually he ends up getting recorded phone calls out publicly. He actually gets the research out publicly or whatnot, and the public completely hides this. Nobody, or the mainstream media, nobody talks about it. And actually, the opposite happens. People actually get suppressed who are reporting on this and then trying to tell the story.
Anyone that steps up to the plate, maybe there'll be a knock on your door too.
Yeah, well, I hope not. But I mean, if
it should be a choice. It should be a choice.
Absolutely,
an informed choice. I heard through the grapevine there might be some type of mandatory vaccine or something. That's atrocious, in my opinion. But
I completely they mandated the flu vaccine in Massachusetts because Charlie Baker is horrendous. But they mandated, he just mandated starting, what day is today, Wednesday, starting Friday, we have to wear masks in public. So if you're in public at all, you have to wear a mask. I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, it gets to the point where, like, it's what happened to our body, our choice, right? When we're talking about women, I agree with that theory in all aspects. If we're talking about women and abortions, it should be their body, should be their choice. If we're talking about any aspects, we should have, if we don't have the power over our own consciousness, our own health, our own, and they're mandating stuff, then it's like you're getting, like, government is seeping into, and big pharma is seeping into the most personal aspects of our lives. I mean, and what's crazy is that everything's become political. Like, I'm a political atheist. I mean, I've had people on from the left, from the right. I've had atheists on. I've had religious people on. I've had libertarians on. I've had socialist ideologies, people who believe in socialist ideologies on. And I love exploring ideas. I don't have a team. I'm not married to any idea. But it seems like when I first got into health and nutrition, like, a lot of people on the left was all for that. They were talking about how the government lies about how weed is unsafe and how cannabis can actually have some medical benefits and all that stuff, but the government was lying about that. So it's like, yeah, we're on the same team. And then all of a sudden something changed where, like, now I'm like, it seems like the right is more for freedom of not having mandated vaccines and all these other type of health freedoms that I appreciate and I think are important. And it's just like, people just aren't seeing that. You should have the right to make these decisions. It should be between you and the doctor, or you and your own research, or your nutritionist, whoever it may be. But if you don't have the right to make those decisions, then how are we any different in North Korea? How, Dave, in my personal opinion.
And I'm with you. I'm basically a political atheist myself. I have no dog in the fight.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
For me, I believe in the consciousness and new thought, a higher thought. It doesn't matter who's in there. It really doesn't. For me personally, I'll thrive and do well no matter what. I could live in Russia. I'd be fine. I could live in China. I'd be fine. It just, to me, America is still, the land of opportunity. And I think the freedoms that we have in America are fantastic. And I'm all for preserving those. And freedom of choice for these type of things are very important to me. That's why I choose to live here and not somewhere else. And I don't think it really matters who gets elected president one way or another. In the big picture, 10, 15 years down the road, we're all going to forget 2020 and all this crazy stuff.
I hope you're right.
5 years from now, we'll just be laughing about this whole fiasco. This is just a replay of what happened back in the 1860s. If you look at it, what was going on in America back in, it's sort of like a cyclical thing. It's a cycle. Same basic angst and upset and so forth was happening. If you look, go check it out. Just Google America.
Are you talking about in the 60s? I mean, because the 60s were crazy.
Oh, they had all sorts of crazy riots in New York.
The civil rights era.
Yeah, you had immigrants coming over from Ireland and New York, and all of a sudden they're told they had to fight for the Union. The Civil War says, "What?"
Yeah, that's wild.
There was like the draft riots, and there was all sorts of racial problems, and you had John Brown and it just goes on and on. I don't want to rehash it, but
Yeah.
it's just a cycle. It's another cycle that we're going through again. And
Yeah.
you know,
I hope you're right.
it's like the United States. They never really dealt with racism properly, and it's like karma coming back to bite us in the butt. And now we're finally forced to deal with it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
No.
we're straying a little off the health and fitness topic.
Well, it's fine.
But
This show, we could talk about anything on this show. We don't even have, we could
but
talk about girls in heels again if you want.
yeah, yeah. Go to Poland, go to Russia, and you'll see the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life.
Well,
Gorgeous,
it's funny
gorgeous.
because I grew up in
High proportion of women are absolutely beautiful. You know, different places I've traveled, and I'm not sure what it is. The guys look great too. Good physiques, good facial features. You know, I'm sure you've probably read some of the Western
yep.
Price work, and you know the palates, you know the shape of the skull. Uh, they just don't get the fast food and the sugars and the junk food like American children. And
Yeah.
while there is a little bit of overweight, you don't see the extreme obesity in any of those countries. Now, you know, some of the industrial countries are starting to catch up. But in a lot of these countries, like the Balkans, man, the Croatians and the Serbs and the Bosnians and the Slovenians, wow, what beautiful people! Really, really muscular and robust and strong. Uh, you know, the McDonald's era hasn't caught up to those folks yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
China, they're getting pretty soft. A lot of fast food in China. Uh, but Russia, man, I was amazed at just how good looking the people are. Iceland was a place that when I first went, the people were fantastic. But over the years, my friend uh, Gujan told me that the fast food has really crept into Iceland. And just within about 15 years, you know, of traveling back and forth, I really started to see the obesity epidemic hitting there. Quite
Yeah.
shocking, you know, quite shocking. But
Well, that's
really,
a
go ahead.
no. I was going to say that something you brought up, the sugar thing. I mean that's one of the most toxic things you can consume. I mean, I've had Dr. Thomas Seyfried on. I think he's from Boston University. He wrote Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and he has like 150 peer-reviewed studies. He was actually a friend of Dominic D'Agostino, who's been on my show, and told me about his work. And then I had him on, and there's direct links between suppressing sugar consumption and then also killing cancer cells. Like you said, sugar is toxic. We know for sure that sugar feeds cancer cells. You know, glucose is an energy source for cancer cells. It only makes logical sense if you don't eat sugar, then you can have some positive effects on the cancer cells, kill them or starve them or whatever it may be. And nobody's interested in it. He's like, this should be stuff that everybody should be talking about and researching and diving into and recommending to their patients or whatever. And he's like, people want to know, you know, how do we make money off this? How do we turn it into a pill? You know, it's like nobody wants
Well,
to.
see, that's the problem. It's like, you know, I'm a big believer in fasting.
I
And,
fast every
you
day.
know,
Yeah.
if I get ill, I don't eat. I mean, it makes no sense to put food in your body when your digestion's impaired, and it is impaired if you're feeling sick. So I really believe in the power of fasting as a healing agent. All the body energy that would go into digesting the food and metabolizing the food is now available for helping build your immune system and combat whatever it is that's beginning to ail you. And I've pretty much, you know, nipped a cold right in the bud within just 24 hours, just fasting.
Now, I
And
see.
I don't know why there's not more well, there have been plenty of research on fasting, but it's all old research. There was plenty of, you know, people that use fasting as a cure. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. John Chilton who lived about 100 years ago, who used fasting regularly, and he cured many so-called incurable ailments. And he fasted people that had gonorrhea, which used to be a real problem back in the day, and syphilis and tuberculosis. And he had great results, completely reducing all symptoms, all signs of that disease through the use of fasting. I myself have fasted up to 14 days at a time. And I can attest that it's a very powerful healing agent. And if I were to be diagnosed with anything, of course, I wouldn't go to a doctor to be diagnosed, but if I'm ailing, I just don't eat. I just lay in a darkened room and watch funny movies because the power of laughter and joy, positive mindset, and just drink water. And then quickly, and it's interesting because in nature, when an animal doesn't feel well, it just lays in the corner, doesn't eat for a day, and then all of a sudden it gets its appetite back, and it's back to moving around. So I would recommend that your listeners start to investigate fasting and start reading about it. Check out this guy, Dr. John Tilden. He wrote a classic book called Toxemia Explained. It's free on the internet. The guy was way ahead of his time. Basically, he was giving Ayurvedic principles. He never studied yoga that I know of, but he was certainly repeating many of the things the yogis were saying 4,000 years ago. And he had tremendous success with his own patients. So much so that the medical establishment at that time were all up in arms. They tried to label him a quack. This is just at the beginning where Big Pharma was starting to make a big inroad into the medical industry. And anyone that wasn't on board was quickly pressured into falling in line. And Tilden railed against the AMA and Big Pharma even 100 years ago. I'm sure he'd roll over in his grave if he knew how bad it got. He had this hope that it was going to get better. But if anything, it got much worse. Much, much worse. Probably worse than he could possibly imagine.
Yeah, that's I had filmmakers, one doctor, Susan Dowen maybe, and she was another filmmaker. She did a documentary called The Big Secret, and it goes through the whole history of the AMA and how Big Pharma infiltrated what we consider medicine and all this stuff. Got pulled from Amazon. They had an agreement with Amazon. It's going to be on Amazon Prime for like ever. Got pulled from Amazon. I think Dr. Brzezinski's movie about cancer also got pulled. Del Bigtree's documentary Vax got pulled. And this is just the power of Big Pharma. You talk about funny movies, and you remind me of you're familiar with Jim Abrams, who did The Naked Gun and
yes.
some of the Well, Jim's been on my show, and he's awesome because I'm a huge fan of his. I had two reasons to have him on. One, I loved his movies, and two, he started the Charlie Foundation. And the Charlie Foundation, his son Charlie, when he was born, had these really violent seizures. He had money, he had resources, he could get access to all the best doctors, couldn't find any treatment to cure his son. And after years and years of these violent seizures that had lasting long-term effects on him, he was having tons of them a day. I mean, obviously that puts stress on the brain, the body, whatever. He finds a book that talks about John Hopkins having some success with the ketogenic diet and curing these seizures. Well, eventually he talks to his doctor, and his doctor's like, "Oh, it sounds too hard." And he's like, "Well, can't be any harder than dealing with my son having these violent seizures every day." So he puts his son on the ketogenic diet, cures him of these seizures, and then starts a foundation named after him, the Charlie Foundation, to do research into this stuff. And the reason I bring up the story, and I've said it many times on the show, is because it's a perfect example of a person who had money, he had resources, he got to see doctors, he had access to doctors that had a huge waiting line, but he got to cut in line because he had friends that donated to the hospital or whatever, and nobody gave him any options besides pharmaceutical drugs, and on his own found an alternative. And so I think a lot of times when you read something in a book, or somebody suggests it to you and they don't have a PhD, or they don't have a diploma on the wall, you think like, oh, it must not work because my doctor's not suggesting this. I think when people hear stories like yours about stuff that you do that works, just because the doctor's not suggesting the same thing doesn't mean you shouldn't entertain it, and it doesn't mean that it's pseudoscience.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I started having a growth right on the side of my head. A client that first alerted me to it. I was up in Vancouver, actually, Canada, and the guy said, "Wow, you better have that looked at." And it started to grow, and it went from the size of maybe a dime to maybe $50. Pretty big. It was brown, and irregular edged, and it was a little scary. It was also kind of weepy, you know. I had no idea what it was, so I immediately went into my own little lockdown. I was staying in Toronto actually at the time. I had flown to Vancouver and I flew back to Toronto. So I was in this little condo I was renting, and I did a 14-day fast. And I was drinking water, some herbal tea, and that was it. And it's very important that you keep your colon clean because you stop having regular stimulus because there's no food pushing to create peristaltic action in your gut. So you can get fecal material kind of trapped up into the bowel. So I went in to a clinic called the Angel of Water. Maybe you've heard of this. It's like a colonic irrigation. And I had a high colonic at the start of the fast. Clean myself out real good. And then I would take daily enemas, fleet enemas, just to clean the colon, to make sure there was no waste trapped up in there, because that waste, of course, would get reabsorbed through the gut lining. They call it leaky gut. You got to get all that waste out of there when you fast. A lot of people don't know that. You just don't stop eating, but you also got to make sure that everything's moved out of your gut. And at the end of the 14 days, the whatever the lesion was or whatever scabbed up and fell off with no mark whatsoever. You can't even see where it was. That's my own personal story. Now, in the meantime, I was watching funny movies. I was going out for daily walks, doing breathing and breath work. Nothing strenuous. You should not strength train during a fast. You know, you want your body to rest. And I just completely rested. The most strenuous thing I did was some stretching, a little light yoga and walking, drinking pure water. And, I got the high colonic irrigation. And lo and behold, it was completely gone. No sign of it whatsoever. And I felt like $1,000,000. And then breaking a fast is very important. You just don't go, have a big meal. I just started with juices and some light mixed juices. Then I started doing soups, like light broth at night. And then that went to fresh fruit and then a salad at night. And then eventually I started reintroducing protein foods about the fourth day. It was just fresh fruits and vegetables for 3 days with some broths and things like that. First day, just juice. Then the second day, broth and juice. The third day, fruit and salad. The fourth day, I actually had a little protein. I had a poached egg.
Yeah. Juicing. I mean, Dr. Max Gerson, it's some of his old therapies that, he was curing people of stuff with, I think, juicing and some other remedies. But yeah, I mean, we can learn a lot from our ancestors, in regards to some of the doctors that came before us. Like you said, you refer to one that has been dead for a long time, but yet his research and his philosophy and opinions are still relevant today. And I think there's a huge problem in the fact that we try to find all solutions in some chemical that's made in a lab and not anything else. And anything else that isn't a chemical that can be patented from a lab is pseudoscience, or it won't work, or it doesn't work, or whatever. But fasting, I fast every day. I eat one meal a day, dinner. And usually, it's late. Like, I haven't ate anything today. I've had coffee. I go to the gym, I work out and everything on an empty stomach. I actually feel better. And I have a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't know how you could do that, on an empty stomach. And it's like, I have to eat. And I'm like, I used to be like that. If I didn't eat before doing some type of sport, I would get lightheaded. But it was because I was so addicted to sugar and I didn't realize it, that I needed some type of food, something that would turn into glucose. And if my blood sugar went down, I would get lightheaded if I was working out. And now I can work out. I can go all day without eating. Cognitively, I feel better. Really, I get more done because I'm not worried about, what's my next meal. Like, I have breakfast and then it's like, what do I got to eat next? And I'm having lunch and I'm ready to think about dinner. It's like, I can kind of just forget about all that, eat one time a day, and I'm good. So how often do you fast? Do you fast every day? And what do you eat mostly?
I usually push the first meal back pretty far to about 12 or 1 o'clock. So I have, from my evening meal till 1, between 11 and 1, depending on what I have going on that day. In the morning, I'll just have yerba mate tea. I don't know whether you're familiar with, I discovered it in Brazil, actually. Everyone has the yerba mate. I think it's pronounced in Brazilian Portuguese, machi, that T-E, chi, machi. It's like, it has like a caffeine-like effect, but it's not strong like coffee. It's very gentle and it's somewhat alkaline. And I'll usually have that with a kombucha, like a glass of kombucha. And if I get hungry, I might have a couple pieces of fresh fruit, like an apple or some grapes or fresh figs or whatever. But usually I don't, only if I get really hungry. And then I have my first chief meal right at midday usually. And that usually is comprised of some type of animal protein. Today I had lamb and a huge raw vegetable salad and broccoli soup. So first I had the broccoli soup, then I eat this big, delicious salad with a little kimchi and some other probiotic type things in there. And then I waited for a few minutes, and then I had my lamb with cauliflower mash potatoes. And then just before I came on, I had some berries that had been cooked up in a cobbler, a grainless crust made out of coconut and almond flour, just to give it a little flavor. And it was blueberries cooked up in a really nice little cobbler, just a small amount. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
So
I'll drink water during the day. And I feel great. 2 meals a day, primarily. A few calories in the morning. I rarely ever get hungry. And I always like to work out before my chief meal, usually. Have a little post-workout meal. My son, who's an artist, has perfected the art of the fast. He eats once every 2 days.
Wow.
And he feels fantastic. And he's ripped. This guy's physique is like a Men's Health fitness model. And he sits a lot in front of the computer, so he's pretty sedentary. And but yeah, he'll eat once every 2 days. And when he eats, he really eats. Kind of like a warrior diet, a little warrior-esque, like Ori Hoppeckler's diet. He layers it. He'll have fast digesting carbohydrates like fruits first, then wait 20 minutes. And then he may have some starchy carbohydrates, and then he'll have proteins. And then that's it. He'll be like a snake. He'll lay up on that. And he said when he eats good. It might be 5,000 calories,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm either fasting or feasting, like Sean Baker says, Dr. Sean Baker. When I do eat, I eat all my calories basically in one sitting, but then I'm good. I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry. I go through the whole day, I'm never hungry. And even
never
rarely,
hungry.
Yeah, which you don't realize how much of a influence it has on your day or how much of your day it takes up hunger, just constantly dealing with that hunger all the time. It's like, oh, I got a snack. I'm getting hungry again. I got to, it's like you finish one meal, you're already stressing about what you're going to eat on the next meal. It's like when you don't have that hunger lingering around, it's a good feeling.
Well, a good way to measure your actual fitness is how long can you go between meals and still function. A man who is not physically fit is going to get hungry very quickly, and he's not fit. He isn't. Even if he has big gee whiz muscles, internally he could be very unfit. His metabolism is not working properly. You should be able to go long periods of time. This is how we were able to survive as a species. We weren't meant to be eating constantly. Where our bodies really do well on very infrequent meals, just like infrequent workouts.
Good point. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. Well, you don't realize how much resource. I use the example of like Thanksgiving dinner. I tell people, I'm like, you want to take a nap after you eat because you ate all that food. I'm like, so that's resources that are going to digesting that food, and that's why you're tired. Now think about, like, to put that in perspective, if you're constantly eating, you're constantly using resources, like you said before. on digesting this food, and you don't get to use those resources on maybe a cold that you're fighting that's maybe lingering a little bit, or some other issues that you may have. So like detoxing and kind of giving your body a break from digesting food so it can work on other stuff is something that's necessary. But the majority of people are constantly eating something, and constantly consuming some type of sugar, right in the morning. You'll put, if it's milk full of sugar, or if it's whatever it may be. I don't think
Breakfast
people.
cereal.
Yeah, which is
It's
just.
it's like eating candy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So did your diet, like when you traveled, has your diet been more or less been the same, or when you went to different countries and different cultures, did you kind of adopt some of their eating habits, or?
Yeah, I would eat the local produce, what's locally produced. It doesn't make sense to be eating bananas and apples. I mean, bananas and pineapples in Iceland,
Yeah, good point.
or figs and mangoes in Norway.
Yeah, but
I would eat what was locally produced, what's in season, and but I'm really into very simplify. I call it meal simplification. Some people call it food combining. I don't like that term. I just simplify my meals to make it more digestible, because it's one thing to eat it, is another thing to digest it, and digestion takes a tremendous amount of energy out of the body. So, and of course everyone forgets about mastication. You got to chew that up. You got to chew each bite to liquid. Put your fork down between each bite. Not drinking copious amounts of liquid while you're eating. You're going to impair your digestion. So usually I'll separate starchy carbohydrates from my protein foods, and I eat fruits pretty much alone. If I have fruit, it's fruit, nothing else.
is there ever any concern about just how much sugar is in fruit, or is that something or do you?
Yeah, there's enough fiber in there. You don't have to worry about it, man. It's a huge difference between having, let's say, a tablespoon of white granulated sugar and eating an apple. Huge difference. There's enzymes in the apple. There's fibers in the apple. There's all these phytonutrients that are there, and it's all balanced in a way that you don't get any kind of, you're not going to get a spike. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. Well, that makes
Now,
sense.
I have, let's say, for example, melon is very easily fermented in the gut, and you should never have melon with any other foods. Otherwise, you're just going to fart like a fire engine, man. You get like a gut fermentation, from hell. So I've had a whole meal of watermelon, which goes through you pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I've eaten like damn near half a watermelon. You know, you certainly urinate a lot afterwards, from all that liquid. And that goes through you really fast. I mean, watermelon, you'll probably digest in about 2.5, 3 hours. It'll be through your system. So I take into account what I've eaten before my next meal. I usually like to get 5 or 6 hours between my two meals. But sometimes, if it's something like watermelon, I might eat a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and the thing about fasting too is because you see a lot of parallels between people who are fasting and doing the keto diet. And one thing I've seen a lot of, well, even with myself, is staying hydrated when you're not eating for long. But when I'm eating one meal a day, like and then most of the time when I'm eating, it's a lot. I'll have a little salad, or I'll have a little cauliflower rice, or spaghetti squash. But most of my meal is going to be meat. So because of it, a lot of hydration you do get, like you said, from like watermelon and things like that. So you take that, you kind of have to remember that it's a little harder to stay hydrated when you're not eating, and when you are eating, you're eating primarily, in my case, meats or whatnot. Are you a subscriber to all these new waters? You're starting to see people become much more conscious on the quality of water that they're buying, and all these. Is it really just a marketing scam? Like, hey, this is alkaline water, or do you think there's something to it?
I think there's something to it, because my girlfriend has got this little machine that creates this vortex that hydrogenates the water, and I couldn't believe how quenching it is. And I have a little vice. I like to drink carbonated water, like Evian or Gerolsteiner. And I don't think that stuff's particularly good for you. It's kind of acidic, certainly not good for your teeth. And I noticed that ever since she got this machine that spins the water, I use a magnesium mineral tablet that I put in. It's like a little fizzy. There's a little magnesium salts in there. I noticed that since I started drinking this has been a month now. I have no craving for carbonated water anymore.
Wow.
And and my thirst is much better quenched. I don't feel the need to drink as much as I used to, which is great for men of my age. You have a tendency to get up a little bit more frequently.
Yeah. Well, I see it. I see it myself too. Where if I drink something that has some type of minerals or some type of potassium or some type of electrolytes in it, it seems like I'm not as thirsty, and I don't cramp up as much and whatnot. So it definitely, yeah. And then obviously there's a lot of good research about alkaline and the benefits of that, and the pH levels and all these things. So I'm always a little weary of like, okay, well, is this just marketing or whatnot? I know there's some benefits, but I'm with you where I honestly do feel like I stay hydrated longer and it's easier to drink and I feel better. So, and I know there's a book that you're not sick, you're thirsty, and there's some researchers that talk about how how important water and good quality water is. And I've had moments where I felt low energy or I've had headaches and I'll just force myself to drink some high quality water and I feel better. So there's probably definitely something to it, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you're a busy guy and, and I'm sure you have plenty of things to do, but thanks, Steve. I'm a huge fan, been watching you for many, many years on all with your journey and doing interviews and whatnot. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And if you have a website or anything, I know you just came out with a workout video that I haven't got a chance to watch yet, but I think it's being released soon. If you
tomorrow, as a matter of fact, I'm releasing.
Okay.
It's a kind of workout that a lot of people are still in lockdown. A lot of gyms are still closed down. Looks like there's going to be a second wave of lockdowns.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, so people are like you said, they're desperate to do something. So anyway, this workout, upper body workout and a lower body. It's a bodybuilding split using isometrics and bodyweight calisthenics and implements from around the house. So it's a real minimalist equipment type workout, but low tech, high concept.
And where can you tell people where they can get that when it is released?
Yeah, the name of my website is maxwellsc.com. The SC stands for strength and conditioning. maxwellsc.com, and that video will be released. And it's probably one. I mean, I think it's like one of the best workout videos I ever did. These are not high production value. What I found a long time ago was people want content, not high production value. I shot it in my mother-in-law's living room, which is where most people's new gym is going to be. That's the new gym, your living room or your garage or your basement or your attic or whatever. So anyway, I shot it in a realistic setting with stuff that you would find around the house, and I put this young firefighter. He's actually an emergency medical technician. This kid's a beast. He's one of my jiu-jitsu partners in Port Townsend. This boy is so strong. And anyway, I put a whooping on him. He, he's a barbell guy, and he was pretty amazed at just how effective this workout was when he got done, just using his body weight. Simple stuff. So. And
that's going to be free on the website, or is there a membership or purchase or anything like that?
No, it's for sale.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I keep my prices down. So.
Yeah. That's and you're right. I think you see it even with podcasts. I've heard Rogan talk about this, how he recorded a podcast on his phone once, and people loved it and didn't care if the quality was a little less. It's like people care about, like you said, the content and what they're getting from it. Yeah, so it's a perfect example of that. So, but thanks again, Steve. Hopefully, I have you on in the near future, and thanks for all the years of wisdom you shared on the show.
We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
Have a good night.
You too.